All right, grace and peace to the body that is the church. Today's video, I'm going to be reviewing a discussion that Next Level had with the Advent Defense League on Daniel chapter 8. I have a little spare time today, so I figured why not review this because, as probably many of you know, Daniel 8 is what I focus on heavily when it comes to Adventism. And it's nice to see there are others having this conversation with Adventists, because there's not a lot of Christians who really understand the SDA position on this topic, Daniel 8, and everything that deals with that, like the sanctuary doctrine, Day of Atonement, type and antitype, and all of that. So it's good to have these conversations out there, and it's even though I disagree with Next Level on certain things, it's good to see other perspectives. But it'd be really interesting actually to see a futurist premill go back and forth with a SDA premill. That'd be pretty epic. It'd be like a Jeep versus a Toyota. That'd be pretty cool. But yeah, let me hope you guys are having a good day, a good Sabbath day, good afternoon, whatever time zone you're in. It is definitely full springtime here, full pollen in the air, and it is kicking my butt. Headaches, stuffy nose, all that glorious stuff. But let's see here. Let's get the video out, and I'm gonna get my e-sword, my trusty e-sword ready. I'm gonna have to upgrade one day and get like a better program and actually pay for a program, because there's certain books I want to review online, and I can't find any without having to pay for them. So I figure why not just get a good program like Logos or something and just pay for the book, although I am super cheap. But all right, let's see. And if anybody is listening who knows this subject at least a little bit and wants to come up, you're welcome to and give your thoughts on what's said, especially those who may not understand this topic too well and why it matters with Adventism a lot. It'd be interesting to hear an outsider's thoughts on it as well. But so Next Level, futurist, top two guys are Seventh-day Adventists, and so their belief would be like heavenly premillennialism, I guess what you'd call it. And the Next Level is the futurist, right? So probably like a form of, I don't really know too much, but form of dispensationalism, I assume. But all right, so I only listened to like a few minutes of this, and I figure I'll just react to it as it being only. I kind of skip. I listen to like 30 seconds, and I skip over like 20 minutes to 30 seconds, and I was just like, oh, I'll just review it live. Why not? Adrian, grace and peace to you. Theologizing subject. Grace and peace to you as well. My Jeep loving brother. Hopefully that Jeep is doing good still.
The question, it says the word sanctuary in verse 14. That's not the
question.
That's
why I say it's earthly. It cannot be heavenly.
Well, the question is still pending. You haven't proved that the word sanctuary there is earthly. You haven't proved that.
Sure, man. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for hearing. Right.
Show me that this verse right here, verse 14, is an earthly sanctuary. Okay, show me that.
Let's see. I don't know. Scroll down a little bit.
A side note, I wonder if that was edited or if that was what we'll find out. I wonder if that part was edited or because if it was edited, that's a really good job.
order here. So welcome to the stage, Next Level. What's up, buddy?
Yo, can you hear me well?
We hear you fine.
Yeah, so I have basically two questions to you. They are kind of related. My first question is, according to the text in Daniel 8, what pollutes the sanctuary, according to the text? And my second question is Daniel 8, when it speaks about the temple, the same event in Daniel 11?
What text specifically are you referring to in Daniel 8?
Daniel 8, verses 12 to 15, basically the prophecy of the 2,300 evening and mornings. What pollutes the sanctuary according to the text? And is this the same event in Daniel 11? Specifically, I think it was verses 35 onward.
Now, I know why he's asking that question. What is it that pollutes the sanctuary? And it's a good question. I have a slight different position on chapter 8. I don't think chapter 8 is about the abomination that makes desolate. Because I think the abomination that makes desolate has a specific time linked with it. I think the 2300 has to do with the God's wrath and indignation upon the transgressors, and that's what causes it to become desolate. And I might get into that more as we go along, but that does intersect with some of what's talked about in chapter 8 or chapter 11, which is and would include the abomination that makes desolate. But the abomination of desolation, or that makes desolate, would not be what's in focus here on chapter 8, in my opinion. But I understand why Next Level is asking that. It's an important question because in the Adventist position, it's not the little horn that tramples a physical sanctuary or does a pagan sacrifice in the sanctuary or takes away and defiles the sanctuary. Rather, it's the record of sins in heaven, sins of professed believers that made the sanctuary unclean, and it needs cleansing from Christ, which is him going through the records.
Mm-hmm. Well, it might be worth reading some of those texts. And I do believe that there is a relation between Daniel 8 and Daniel 9 and Daniel.
I'm going to be as fair as I can in this review as well, too. Fair to both sides. So if Next Level misrepresents or makes a bad point, or if Edwin makes a good point, I'll definitely make note of that and let you guys know what I think.
Chapter 11 as well. Daniel 8 and 9 seem to be more symbolic, whereas Daniel 11 get a bit more specific and more literal. So we're reading here in Daniel 8:12, and an host was given unto Israel.
Now, I might have to rewind a lot because I tend to drift off in my thoughts, and also if I'm doing something else, I do not hear what the speaker is saying, so I have to rewind it and listen again.
So we're reading here in Daniel 8:12, and an host was given unto him against the daily sacrifice by Israel. As well, Daniel 8 and 9 seem to be more symbolic, whereas Daniel 11 get a bit more specific and more literal.
Now, Daniel 8 and 9 is more symbolic. Not quite sure what he means by that, because 8, 9, and 10 through 12 is all they're all linked together in some way, shape, or form. And to say that chapter 8 is symbolic, it doesn't. I'd have to hear more what he means by that, because that doesn't really jive. Just hearing it like that, it doesn't really. I don't think it's a legitimate thing to say about 8 and 9 in contrasting it with 10 through 12. Because there's a lot of the same language in all mixing together in the different chapters.
So we're reading here in Daniel.
DCA, grace and peace to you. If you want to come up, or if there's another former SDA or an SDA that is in the chat, what happens to be, you're welcome to come up. I'll copy the link and post it in the live chat. If you want to come up, I'll look in about a minute, and I'll add you to the conversation.
8:12, and an host was given unto him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. So you're saying what polluted the sanctuary?
Yeah, according to the text.
Okay. Well, it says it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. So it seems like it's saying that casting the truth down causes this issue. Then it says, and then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said to the certain saint which spake, how long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot? And of course, the answer is unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. So
okay, let me ask
it cast down the truth to the ground.
Would you say that the little horn is the one who pollutes the sanctuary according to the text?
According to which text?
From verses, you can read from.
I'll be right back. All right, somebody was at the door. Do forgive me for that. Let's see here. Okay, all right.
From 12, I think. You can scroll up a little bit.
Yeah, it was like big time on what that truth to the ground. Yeah. That's not what defiled the sanctuary in this text. That's part of the actions of the little horn. That's not what defiles the sanctuary, though.
Mm-hmm. And the host was given him against the daily by reason of transgression.
Yeah, the hymn is in reference to the little horn. You can start from 11 if you want, even.
Mm-hmm. And he exalted himself as high as the prince of the host, and by him the daily was taken away, and the place of the sanctuary was cast down. Yeah, the little horn is definitely causing these issues. What's your question?
So when the temple is cleansed in the end, regardless of how you take this period, it appears to be cleansed only from the pollution of the little horn, according to the text.
It appears to be what?
Cleansed from the pollution of the little horn.
Okay. And the point of that is, I'm not following.
I wonder if he's actually not following it, or if he's just kind of playing dumb on purpose to kind of have Next Level bring out his argument more. I don't know which one it is, because it's pretty obvious what he's addressing. He's addressing the SDA position on what defiles the sanctuary and causes it to need to be cleansed and how it's cleansed.
How can you have the temple in heaven that is cleansed from the sins of the little horn? It has nothing to do with Yom Kippur, nothing to do with the sins of the believers.
Gotcha. So basically, you're arguing that this is so you're thinking Antiochus Epiphanes. So you're thinking that this is.
No, I am a futurist. I don't think it's Antiochus Epiphanes. I believe it's the third future temple. But even if I'm wrong,
gotcha. Okay.
How can you show that it has anything to do with a heavenly temple? The little horn does not go to heaven.
Okay, sure. There's two ways I can show that. So go to verse 10. I got to look it up on my side here. All right. So verse 10 says, and it waxed great even to the host of heaven. And it cast out some of the hosts and of the stars of the ground and stamped upon them. So you see here that the little horn attacks the host of heaven. So that's how you know that it's attacking things in heaven and not just things on the earth.
I would agree that it's attacking heaven indirectly rather directly, because even if you say that you have a heavenly temple, if the cleansing is in the Holy of Holies, the little horn cannot go there.
Okay, so if you agree, then where's the contention? Seems like you were saying earlier it was just
I have to rewind that.
an issue.
Because
All right, I have to rewind.
even if you say that you have a heavenly temple, if the cleansing is in the Holy of Holies, the little horn cannot go there.
Okay, so if you agree, then where's the contention?
Oh man, sorry.
Seems like you were saying earlier it was just.
Go back a little further. I want to hear what Edwin had to say.
I got to look it up on my side here. All right, so verse 10 says, and it waxed great even to the host of heaven. And it cast out some of the hosts and of the stars of the ground and stamped upon them. So you see here that the little horn attacks the host of heaven. So that's how you know that it's attacking things in heaven and not just things on the earth.
I would agree that it's attacking heaven indirectly.
So I would ask Edwin right there to unpack what that means, what that looks like. Because we all agree with what the text says. Everybody agrees with it. How are you interpreting and understanding that? And that is where it'll get into the nitty gritty and the good stuff. Because as we saw, he's going to ask him, so what do we disagree on? Well, one, he's a futurist, so he disagrees with a lot with your interpretation here in verse 10. The little horn waxed great even to the host of heaven. It cast down some of the hosts and some of the stars to the ground and stamped upon them. Yeah, there'd be a number of disagreement, but maybe it'll come out more.
Rather directly, because even if you say that you have a heavenly temple, if the cleansing is in the Holy of Holies, the little horn cannot go there.
Okay, so if you agree, then where's the contention? Seems like you were saying earlier it was just an issue happening on an earthly temple. It says here.
Yeah, I believe it's in an earthly temple, yeah. And by casting the truth to the ground and all these things, he's basically making claims to be God himself, thus attacking heaven indirectly. Not that he is going to heaven to do something there.
Okay, we don't believe anybody went to heaven to do something there. What are you talking about? We don't believe that the papacy, which we interpret here, or anybody in that religious system took a trip to heaven and did anything up there.
Yeah, but you're taking verse 14 when it comes.
Okay, so if that is the case, and what Edwin said is true, that no little horn entered the sanctuary, how did it become defiled? How did it become dirty and in need of cleansing? That's, I think, what Next Level is asking.
Comes about the cleansing to be about a heavenly temple. If you say that it's a heavenly temple, why are you putting Yom Kippur and the sins of the believers there when the text is just speaking about the little horn and his actions?
Because he's attacking things in heaven. It doesn't mean he has to take a trip to heaven to do that. It's a heavenly assault.
Yeah, but if he doesn't, then the sanctuary does not become defiled in heaven. Like if the if the sanctuary is a heavenly sanctuary, then there is no defilement of the sanctuary. He can trample the host and the stars, which are God's people here on earth, and the sanctuary in heaven does not become defiled.
So this is not just vertical, it's horizontal, it's also vertical. So by attacking God's people, he essentially attacks heaven itself. He's attacking both heavenly things and earthly things. It's not just earth.
We all agree with that. Next Level does, I do. All the SDAs do. Everybody agrees with that. That's not the issue.
Yeah, we definitely agree that he's attacking heavenly things, but it has nothing to do with the heavenly temple. That's my point. If it was the heavenly temple, you cannot make sense of this text.
To do with the heavenly temple, you make a claim, you got to back it up. How do you know it has nothing to do with the heavenly temple?
Because we know that the little horn cannot go to heaven, and even you agree.
Of course he can't go. Nobody can go to heaven.
So how can he pollute a structure in heaven?
He's attacking heavenly. So take another look at the text, okay? It says, and he waxed great even to the host of heaven. He doesn't have to take a trip to go to heaven. There is a heavenly sanctuary. There's no doubt about that. We can.
This verse 10 could even be a dual meaning. In other words, the stars and the host could refer to both God's people on earth and the spiritual battle that's happening behind the scenes, like what chapter 10 talks about. If this is linked with chapter 10 through 12, like what they believe, then that would make sense. But at the very least, it is referring to God's people, but it could also referring to the spiritual angelic battle behind the scenes.
We can discuss that if you don't agree that there's a heavenly sanctuary. But it says that he attacks the host of heaven. So his attack doesn't necessitate for him to go. Let me show you an example, okay? Go to Hebrews chapter 10. Maybe this will help. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 29.
I'm not sure why we're going to Hebrews 10 when chapter 8 tells us what we need to know about who defiles the sanctuary. But
And look at the same verbiage being used here. It says, how much sore punishment suppose ye shall he be thought worthy, who hath trodden underfoot the Son of God? That's the same language you find in Hebrews 8. And yet, notice, it says that he's trodden under. They didn't have to take a trip to heaven to be trodden underfoot the Son of God. No.
Yeah, I'm connecting the trip to heaven from verse 14 because the text says that the temple.
You gotta let me finish.
Yeah,
there's no way to have a conversation if you don't let me, right?
Yeah, I cannot hear you. Yeah, I don't know when you're stopping to see. Go on.
Okay, I haven't paused in my sentence. So what I'm saying is, you can see here by way of an example that you can attack things in heaven, or in this case, a person who is in heaven, by your actions here on earth. In the same manner, the little horn goes both vertical and horizontal and vertical. He attacks things on earth, and that itself is also an assault on heavenly things.
Again, all of that can be true. Fine. Let's say that's absolutely 100%. That is the interpretation for this. You still don't have a defiled sanctuary in heaven. You don't have a dirty sanctuary in heaven that needs to be cleansed. Because it uses the same word, trodden underfoot. So therefore, there's a sanctuary in heaven that becomes defiled when the little horn tramples God's people on earth. Doesn't make any sense.
Things as well. The sanctuary, according to Daniel 8:14, that's the question, because your question is about the temple. Is it the temple in heaven or is it the temple on earth? How would you prove that it is that when it says the word sanctuary in verse Daniel 8:14, that is the earthly sanctuary?
I would corroborate with other parts of the Bible, but my point is that even presupposing that you're correct that the temple is in heaven, you still cannot derive your theology on Yom Kippur to be about that, because verse 14, when it speaks about the cleansing of the temple, it is specifically in reference to the little horn. Only him. That is the part that the angel is saying it will take this long to be cleansed from. Nothing to do with believers, nothing to do with Yom Kippur. It is basically all of Daniel 8 is telling you where the little horn appears, what it does, how much time it takes to cleanse the temple from him. That's all. That's all it says.
Okay, so I'm not sure. You said you were an Adventist one time. I think you know how we interpret sanctuary to be heavenly. So you say you would go to other verses, okay? There are other verses I can go to as well. For example, Jesus, and now I know you're a futurist, but Jesus takes the abomination of desolation spoken of here and goes way past Antiochus Epiphanes, for example. To him, it was not something that happened historically. It was something that is going to happen after his timing. So I would also go to other texts, okay? Secondly, there is no text in the Bible that says there would be a future third temple in the Middle East in Jerusalem. The only text you have, I think you may have, would be where Paul says that the son of perdition, the man of sin, would basically assault or sitteth himself in the temple of God. But the same author, which is Paul, uses that same phrase, temple of God, to refer to God's people when he writes his letters to the Corinthians. So temple of God does not mean a construction of a earthly system that reinitiates the sacrificial system, etc., in the Middle East, if that's what you're thinking. Because to Paul, temple of God would be an assault on the Christian church, because temple of God refers to the Christian church.
Right. I would actually agree with Edwin on this point. It's very true. And it is I would say a strong point against the futurist position. I would agree with him on this.
Well, what you read in Daniel 8, I would say.
But even the SDA commentary, though, like I don't understand why I do understand why, but why he's focused so heavily on Next Level trying to prove that it's an earthly sanctuary in verse 14, because even the SDA commentary grants that it's probably a double fulfillment in chapter 8. And let me pull it up and I'll read it so you don't have to just take my word for it. I am not a liar, but you don't know who I am personally, so I'll give the quotations and the sources and everything. Now it isn't a hard copy, so it's I can't show it on the screen. Give me a couple seconds to find it. I think it's, let's see here. Let's see. So this is in the SDA commentary, book 4, that covers Isaiah to Malachi. It's on page 874, and it's commenting on Daniel chapter 11, verse 31. And it's talking about the abomination that makes desolate. That's the phrase it's commenting on. And on the second paragraph, and if you have this commentary, you find it online, you're welcome to read the whole thing, obviously. But in the second paragraph on this, it says, and this again is on page 874, it says, and I quote, "In view of the fact that Daniel 9:27 is part of the angel's explanation of Daniel 8:11 through 13, the natural conclusion is that Daniel 8:11 through 13 is a blended prophecy, similar to that of Matthew 24. And then they say, see on Desire of Ages, page 628. That applies both to the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem by the Romans and to the work of the papacy in the Christian centuries." End quote. Oh, and then they go on to say, make it clear that they're not saying that this proves that it can be about Antiochus, because Jesus is quoting from here. But the point is that even the SDA commentary is saying that it's a blended prophecy, and that this does refer to the earthly and the heavenly sanctuary. And that makes a big problem, and maybe Edwin is already aware of this problem, which is why he's not really wanting to defend that. And I don't know the level of knowledge that Edwin has. Maybe he has more knowledge than some of these guys on here, or he knows a better position on this. I have no idea. But a number of these guys in here were pretty well known in the SDA community, like Raymond F. Cottrell. He was the associate editor. And there was Leroy Froome was a part of this series, and others. But yeah, even the SDA commentary acknowledges that this refers in part to the earthly sanctuary. So if that is the case, even if it is referring to 70 AD and not 167 BC, even if that is the case, how did the earthly sanctuary become defiled in this? And how can you say that is how can you then argue that both the heavenly and the earthly get defiled, but in different ways from this text? Because there's only one way it gets defiled, and it is through the activity of the little horn.
Is the second text for the third temple, because Daniel requires a temple in the end of days to happen. You're presupposing that it's heavenly. I don't, but still you cannot explain how verse 14 specifically is magically taken to support Yom Kippur SDA theology when the context is just for the little horn. That's what I cannot understand.
Okay, so first of all, you didn't even ask me if Yom Kippur. I didn't mention that at all.
So that's the standard understanding of the SDA. They presuppose Yom Kippur is 1844.
Next level. So you're having a conversation with me right now. So you take my words and what I'm saying. Okay. All right. I did not mention any of that, though I'm not saying I disagree with that. I'm mentioning things I want you to respond to.
That's fine, but it's kind of goofy to then kind of like strong arm him or puff up your chest and be like, hey, listen to the words that are coming out of my mouth, boy. You know, he's making a good argument about the Day of Atonement. And yeah, your church does link this with the Day of Atonement type and antitype. And I'm not sure why Edwin's not wanting to defend that, other than he's wanting to, stick to a certain point, which is fine. But that's still a good argument against the SDA position on this that needs to be addressed by Edwin in here, even if it is later on down the road, which it might be. But it's because if this is in fact in reference to the antitypical Day of Atonement, then the SDA position doesn't even really stand, even with this text. Because if in fact the sanctuary is being cleansed for 2300 evenings and mornings, then at the end of the 2300, the sanctuary is cleansed. That means the Day of Atonement is done. The antitypical Day of Atonement is done in 1844. Not the second phase of it, but it's done in 1844. If Daniel 8 is talking about this so-called antitypical Day of Atonement.
Making the claim that the temple in Daniel 8:14 is an earthly temple. I'm telling you that if you make a claim, you've got to show me the evidence of why it's an earthly temple. And I presuppose that you may be referring to Paul when he speaks about the man of sin sitting in the temple of God. If that's not the text you're going to refer to, what evidence can you show in order to refute my understanding that it's the heavenly sanctuary, that there is the earthly sanctuary? What text can you show? What is it? What's in the context, or what other verse can you show?
This one that we just read, that there is a temple that needs to be.
Now, this is actually a good argument. Now that I think about it more, and Edwin said that more, it is actually a decent argument against the futurist position because of how the New Testament interprets what the temple is. My position doesn't have this problem at all, but Next Level's position does have this problem because he then has to try to prove it. He's going to have to even very quickly kind of show how his hermeneutic, dispensational futurist type of hermeneutic is true. And again, given that the New Testament interprets the temple not as the physical sanctuary in Jerusalem, but Christ and believers that are in Christ. So, yeah, that's actually a decent argument against Next Level's position on a futurist position. But there's some easy answers from my position to answer this. And it's just in the context.
Be polluted.
Okay, that's circular. That's a circular argument. Okay, you can't use the same text to prove the same argument. You've got to find
you agree with me
evidence
that a reader can read Daniel 8 and presuppose an earthly temple, just as you're presupposing some other temple?
I think you can do that with anything in the Bible. I think
that's a decent point, right? Edwin is also presupposing that this is a heavenly sanctuary. And a heavenly sanctuary is less likely, a lot less likely to be referenced here in verse 14 and 13. A lot less likely. You have to do a lot more hermeneutical gymnastics to try to prove the point that the sanctuary here in chapter 8 is a heavenly sanctuary that does not get defiled by the little horn, but by believers' sins that are kept on record in the most holy compartment of it. That's a lot harder to prove on Daniel 8. Actually, you can't really prove that in Daniel 8. Whereas it's a lot easier to read, it's just a lot more natural to read that the sanctuary here is the earthly sanctuary, because it does get trampled by the little horn. And similar / same language is used to reference that which was done by Nebuchadnezzar to the earthly sanctuary when he was used by God to dish out indignation on the transgressors during the time of the first beast. Same language is used, or similar language, if not same.
Context needs to speak along with the rest of Scripture.
Okay, so when Scripture mentions the temple,
show me how this verse means earthly sanctuary. I'm actually like 3 times. Show me how this verse, and don't say by the same verse, because that would be a circular reasoning.
Okay, Revelation. Let's go to Revelation 11.
Wait. When we spoke about earlier, I did 2 things. I gave context, and then I went out to other verses. Give me context, then we can go out to other verses. That's the fair thing to do. Where in the context is this talk about an earthly sanctuary?
But in the context, you didn't prove that it was a heavenly sanctuary. You read that the hosts of heaven and the stars get trampled. That doesn't prove it's a heavenly sanctuary at all, in any way, shape, or form. Especially given what Daniel 12, 3 defines the stars as. It's God's people. Just because he uses the phrase "host of heaven" does not in any way prove that it's a heavenly sanctuary. That doesn't prove your case at all. So that's like telling him to do something you did not do, is what everyone's doing right now.
Where?
Well, I would say that Daniel is specifically talking about an earthly sanctuary, because that was the Jewish idea of the temple. No, Daniel didn't have the New Testament idea of the bodies, our bodies being the temple and so on. And I would say that Daniel cannot contradict the minor prophets, which specifically speak about futuristic interpretations of the Middle East. Nothing to do with the heavenly sanctuary.
What verse in Daniel 8, and you can even go to Daniel 9, what verse is talking about an earthly sanctuary?
What about Daniel 10? Go to Daniel 10 or 11. Very easy to prove it with Daniel 11.
I said Daniel 11. I think that I said Daniel 11:35, for example.
Yeah.
Okay, so
exactly.
To be clear,
yeah, exactly. That's a good answer right there. That's a good answer. I don't know how Next Level understands Daniel 11, so that must mean that 11:35 is future for him as well too, which would make sense.
You're going to leave the context of Daniel 8 and 9. Leave the context of Daniel 8, just to make that clear. And because we can go to Daniel 11, but you're going to leave Daniel 8, and you're not going to answer the question of how do you know in the immediate context that is an earthly sanctuary? How can you prove it? You're not going to do that, right? Just want to make sure.
But you agree with me that the text in Daniel 8 can be about earthly sanctuary. So I'm progressing further by going to other places. If you say that it's neutral text that can be taken either way, why would I stay here?
Okay, I'm not contending you going elsewhere, because I believe all Scripture is profitable for doctrine. But the fair thing to do, I think you understand this, is what did the author mean in his context when he wrote it in the immediate context? Then we can go to what the rest of he said, and then what the rest of Scripture said. It's an in to out, way of interpreting things. Okay.
Well, if what the author meant in his immediate context when he wrote it, that would definitely be the earthly sanctuary then. Daniel was not talking about thinking a heavenly sanctuary. That would be earthly. That point right there would be actually against the SDA position. But it's really simple. But his futurism is making it hard for him to address this point. And there's probably a point he hasn't really thought about, which, I mean, That's why these conversations are pretty neat to have, is because you can't, as one person, you can't think of every single point and every single thing. And so having these back and forth, it kind of gets the juices flowing, and you start, okay, well, that might be an issue with my position. This is what somebody who is not super dogmatic on their belief would do. That actually seems to be a kind of like a problem with my position. So I'm gonna have to go back and see if I can kind of deal with it, or if I can, I may have to change my position or something. It's something that the SDAs tend to not do.
Okay. Where in Daniel chapter 8 can you show that the word sanctuary in verse 14 is the earthly sanctuary? That's what I want. You made the claim. I want the proof or some evidence.
Well, first the word.
You might be right. Let me put it this way. You might be right. Okay. I want to hear it though.
So
well, yeah, because even the SDA commentary, which at Next Level probably didn't know this at the time, but the SDA commentary, as I read to you guys, grants that it is in part the earthly sanctuary.
The proof would be the word.
Which actually, if he knew that, he could use that and say, well, then since your own commentary agrees with me that it is in part the earthly sanctuary, although again his futurism causes problems, but either way, since the commentary agrees that it is in part the earthly sanctuary, you now have the burden of proof to prove that it is also referring to the heavenly sanctuary, because, as Edwin just said, the kind of like the default position that Daniel would have had when he was writing this would have been the earthly sanctuary.
For cleansed, it's not really cleansed, it's restored to its rightful state, the word sadak. If it was heavenly, you cannot restore a heavenly structure. Only an earthly structure can be corrupted in a sense and be restored.
It'll be on the 9th. It'll be on the 9th of May. So next Saturday, next Sabbath.
Where does it say you can't restore a heavenly structure? What verse says they can't restore a heavenly structure?
How can you restore a perfect being?
What? Do you really need a text to say that? If you need a text to say that there is nothing in heaven that will ever need restoration or cleansing from filthiness and sin in any way, like if you need a text to prove that, then you're kind of stuck in your position no matter the evidence. It seems like, at least that's what that seems like to me, because there is nothing in the text of Scripture, and I know of a single verse that they're going to go to. There's nothing in Scripture that talks about heaven ever being defiled. The very presence of God is there. God himself dwells there. There's nothing that is going to defile it. There's no sin that is going to enter it. It is perfect. There's no restoration that is needed. Whenever restoration and cleansing is ever spoken of in the Scriptures, and I think I can say this dogmatically, if not, correct me, but whenever cleansing, restoration, sin, filthiness, all that is ever talked about, it is referencing things on earth and humans. Especially cleansing. That is always referencing things on earth.
That is in heaven, perfect construction in heaven. It never gets polluted.
Bro, how can God become a man? I mean, come on. God is the creator of logic. Give me a verse that says that that the heavenly sanctuary cannot be polluted.
Nothing unclean will enter heaven. There you go.
Nothing unclean. So Jesus did not go to a heavenly sanctuary to minister on our behalf?
Not for the...
Whoa, wait. He said nothing unclean will enter heaven. And then Edwin's response was, so Christ did not enter into the heavenly sanctuary? I'm not sure if what he's implying there is that there is some sort of uncleanliness attached to Christ. And we all know where that he's going to go where he was going when he was thinking that. But
the purpose of cleansing sins, that's strictly SDA interpretation. Nobody believes this.
Okay, so you're saying that Jesus is not ministering in a heavenly sanctuary for our sins, for the sins that he bore on the cross. So let me ask you, what is he ministering for? What is he doing in the heavenly sanctuary? The Bible clearly says he went to a heavenly sanctuary.
The Bible says that he's interceding for us.
I don't even think it's actually a sanctuary in heaven, because the sanctuary on earth was what was the main purpose of the sanctuary on earth? It was God dwelling with his people. That was the main purpose of the sanctuary, which is why it always had to be cleansed, or had to be cleansed every year, because it housed the special presence of God. He dwelt amongst his people. And that's the type. The antitype is being in the presence of God in heaven. Not that God got his construction license and built some heavenly sanctuary that typifies being in his presence in perfect holiness when he's already there. That doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense.
But it doesn't say that any sins are present there.
Okay.
It doesn't.
All right. So let's go back to Daniel chapter 8, okay? And then I know Pastor Burrell wants to share something. So one more time, I'm gonna ask you one more time. Don't give me what you think is human logic, or this can't be because of X, Y, and Z. Because God does many things that can't be. He can flood the world with water, right? He can rain fire from heaven. So I want a verse.
None of those are comparable to bringing sin into heaven in his presence. That's just wild. That's wild to me the more I think about it, that he's trying to justify that sin and uncleanliness can enter heaven and hang out in heaven for, what, 2,000 years?
That gives evidence that this word sanctuary here is in earth, the earthly sanctuary that is going to be, and further out that later, you can talk about this later, that a future Antichrist system is going to pollute somewhere in the Middle East or wherever the third temple is going to be, constructed. Show me that this verse right here, verse 14, is an earthly sanctuary. Okay, show me that.
Imagine being able to build an app with your name on it, just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44, a complete AI creation platform.
Let's see. I don't know. Scroll down a little bit.
Where to what verse?
Let me read. I need to read the entire chapter. I mean, he wants me to stick just to this text, so let me see what I can use.
Oh, okay. Just let me know what verse you want.
So I would say that another argument would be that if the little horn arises from an earthly geographical location, when he attacks this temple, we don't know where this temple is. Most likely answer is that it's going to be on earth.
Most likely won't suffice, my friend, because the text also says that he casts down the truth to the ground. He attacks the hosts of heaven. So he does make an assault on heavenly things. So the
heavenly things being things on earth. It still doesn't prove that it's a heavenly sanctuary because it's heavenly things. It's things on earth that are being trampled upon and thrown down. And again, Next Level's futurism is getting in the way here. It's making it hard for him to prove it. So it's a good argument from Edwin, but the context makes it abundantly clear that it is referring to an earthly sanctuary because of at what time period in history this is happening. And that'll get into, I have a bunch of videos me proving that already. It's during the time of the third beast kingdom, Greece. That alone right there proves that it's the earthly sanctuary, because even the SDA theology, the heavenly sanctuary does not become defiled or unclean until after the cross. So this would have to default to the earthly sanctuary.
Question is still pending. How can you show that the word sanctuary here, is an earthly sanctuary? And if you can't, by the context, just say so. We can go to chapter 11. Maybe that's going to help.
But I would say that my interpretation is way better than yours. You have a heavenly temple that you agree that according to the text is polluted, but you don't agree that it's polluted by the Antichrist.
All right, guys.
Yeah.
Everybody should believe Next Level because, in his opinion, his interpretation is better. I'm not sure if that's the best way to reason, my friend. But anyway, let's go. All right, let me give Burrell a chance there, and then we'll go to, you wanted to go to chapter 11, I think. So, Burrell, did you want to share something?
Hey, Next Level, how's it going, brother?
Yo.
So I just want to make sure I understand your question. Understand your objection. You're saying that the text says that it's the little horn that pollutes the sanctuary. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Okay, I agree with that, and I believe I heard Edwin say he agrees. It's the little horn that pollutes the sanctuary.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to follow. Therefore, because the little horn pollutes the sanctuary, it can't be a heavenly sanctuary. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because he cannot go there. And even Edwin said that he cannot go there, but for some reason, when it says he objected even to the heavenly host and so on, whatever the reading is there, Edwin, the text doesn't say that the temple is cleansed from these things. The temple is cleansed specifically from the pollution of the little horn. So either the little horn is polluting the Holy of Holies or not.
Okay, I hear you. So I do agree that the little horn pollutes the temple, and the temple has to be cleansed from the pollution of the little horn. No disagreement there. And you said the little horn cannot pollute the heavenly temple because he cannot go there. Now I believe Edwin did show a very strong text. I won't repeat it, or I won't go back there, but he showed in Hebrews chapter 10 where the language of trampling someone underfoot can be used figuratively. Do you at least concede that trampling underfoot doesn't have to mean literally going to the temple in heaven?
I don't see how that's a strong argument, because a lot of the language in the Bible can be understood literal or figurative or symbolic. That still does not prove it's a heavenly sanctuary at all. Again, grant, if I was Next Level, I'd grant that position, say, okay, that's exactly what that's referring to. Okay, it's defiling things in heaven in Hebrews 10, fine. How does that now prove that it's a heavenly sanctuary in Daniel 8? I would just use their same argument back at them, because it still does not prove that it's a heavenly sanctuary at all.
And trampling it, but it can be figurative language. Do you at least concede that that's possible?
I do concede that this is possible, but the problem is that what is the cleansing of the sanctuary? That is the basic question. Is it the cleansing of the Holy of Holies or general attacks against heaven?
I think that's a good question. I'd like to answer it. But first, if I may, I'd like to ask you a question. In Daniel 8, chapter 2, because we're talking about reading things in context, we want to do sound exegesis, mean reasoning from the evidence of the text to our final conclusion, letting the author define himself. What did Daniel...
Yes, let the author define it. Yes, exactly. It's one thing to say that. It's another thing to do that. It's like words don't have much meaning if they're not backed up with action.
He'll say that he saw in Daniel 8, verse 2. Would you like to help me with that? Next Level? What did Daniel say he saw?
Geographical location where there was a battle between two animals that represent nations.
Okay, more specifically, what kind of literature is this? Daniel said, and I saw in a, what are we talking about?
A vision.
So let's pause right there.
I want to tell you a story.
I used to believe that Jesus...
Edwin showed you a cross-referencing text where the language of trampling underfoot is used figuratively. We know that when people sin willfully against the light they have, that's what Paul, or the writer of Hebrews, is talking about in Hebrews chapter 10. We know they don't literally go to heaven to the right hand of God and trample on Jesus. We know it's figurative. That's one context over there in Hebrews. Now, if Daniel says, and I saw in a vision and it came to pass, in visionary literature, in this language, is it more likely that the little horn trampling the sanctuary underfoot is literal or figurative?
Either. Just because it's in a vision doesn't mean it's not going to be literal. It won't be a literal goat or a little horn that like has little feet and tramples on all little people. Someone's at the door. Give me 1 second. Okay, I'm back. So he's trying to build the case that because it's in a vision, it's going to be symbolic language. Therefore, trying to connect even more the point that trotting on a foot is symbolic and not literal. This is not how you do things. So because a word is used or a phrase is used in the Bible somewhere else does not mean that by itself it's that the same idea is connected in two different places. You have a vision here that uses symbols. Then you have the explanation of those symbols by the angel. And if you go to that explanation, it is abundantly clear that the little horn is the one that destroys things, tramples things. This includes what? The sanctuary. This is Next Level's point. On top of that, the time of when this is happening makes it impossible. Even if you want to say it's symbolic, all that does just makes it more or less meaningless. Because during the time of the third goat or third beast, which is the goat.
You tell me, if the cleansing is literal, is the pollution literal?
I'm just asking, if we're reading visionary literature, which do we agree that we're reading a vision that Daniel saw? We agree. So in this context, in this literary setting, is it more likely that Daniel is describing something literal, a literal little horn, literally going to heaven and literally trampling a sanctuary? Or by the way, is he even talking about a literal little horn literally trampling an earthly sanctuary? Or is he using figurative language?
He is using figurative language to represent real realities. The reality is that there is going to be a little horn, meaning some antichrist power that is sinning against the heavenly host.
Okay, so you are admitting that this context does not demand literalism, and that honestly the context demands a figurative interpretation. Either way, both of us are.
The context demands a figurative interpretation. No, the angel gives you the interpretation, and it's quite literal and real in real time, in real life, on Earth.
Are bringing a figurative interpretation.
Because, it doesn't change much. I'm not sure why you go there.
Because some earthly ruler destroying the earthly temple in Jerusalem, is just as much of a figurative interpretation as talking about how. And this is what Edwin showed directly out of the context from the beginning, because you initially mentioned verse 12. He mentioned that the little horn cast down the truth to the ground. And so where Seventh-day Adventists are going with this, it's very simple. What we're saying is, first of all, you got to get the identity of the little horn right. That's first. And
which they don't.
You got to ask, who is it?
And that's their problem, is they don't get that right. They get it wrong. So they have to do all of this jumping around, all of this connecting, when it's actually pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. Daniel has a vision of symbols. Gabriel comes and explains the symbols. Simple.
Whoever it is, when we talk about casting down the truth to the ground, are we primarily talking about a military assault or a political campaign, or is this a spiritual assault and a spiritual campaign to attack God's truth? And
both. The little horn does both. It's not one or the other. He does both. And it's the both that causes the sanctuary. It's the physical trampling by the little horn, desecration, taking away of the daily.
If there is indeed some power that arose that made a special rebellion or attack on God's truth, the outcome of that is that God's people are going to be led away from truth and led into sin. And in that way, their sins that are committed because of this deception are going to be polluting the heavenly sanctuary. So
see, that's goofy, because then if that was the case, then the sanctuary has been polluted since Adam sinned. The heavenly sanctuary has always been polluted since Adam sinned, if that's the case. If sins, that doesn't even make any sense. If our sins pollute the heavenly sanctuary in some way, I don't even know how, but because I believe the SDA just believes that sins are actions that we do here on earth. If that is the case, then there's no way that our actions here on earth would pollute a heavenly sanctuary. Let alone the heavenly sanctuary then has been defiled and has never been cleansed since Adam sinned. So from the first sin, Adam, until Christ's return, the sanctuary will be defiled and unclean. It is never clean during that time. But Daniel 8 tells us what? Even if we grant our position that at 1844, the sanctuary is cleansed. Day of Atonement is completed at 1844.
So that's how we're interpreting, and I'm admitting we're all observing the same facts, that the little horn pollutes the heavenly sanctuary. Our interpretation stems from identifying the little horn. Here are some things that you're going to have to consider, next level. You're going to have to consider bringing some exegetical rigor to your study of the book of Daniel. One of the fundamental exegetical questions that you have to ask is, how does an author structure his writing? You cannot make serious interpretations of the book of Daniel without observing the macro structure of the book of Daniel, meaning the obvious and intentional parallels that Daniel draws between, for example, chapter 2 and chapter 7, looking at 4 kingdoms.
Which that actually shoots them in the foot. But all positions do that. It's kind of like, I don't know, this like, and maybe he's doing it just because he thinks Next Level has not done this, which may be the case. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt that that's why. But it's like all theological systems do this. They were doing this before Adventism even existed. All theological systems interpret the scriptures given their own way, but they recognize and see these parallels. All of us see these parallels, you guys. We see that chapter 8, 9, 10 through 12 are linked in some way. We're arguing that the SDA position does not link them properly because the SDA position and the way they want to link all these is focused on one thing, or one main thing, and that is to prove that 1844 is a true prophetic date. If that was not their position, if they did not hold to 1844 being a prophetic date, they would not be handling the text in the way they do. They'd not be connecting it in the way they do. That's just a fact. It's because of 1844 that they do this. And so for him to say, well, you have to consider all these things, you have to understand there's this meta narrative, there's this theme, you got to connect all of them. When in reality, his system, it's about 1844 in these chapters. I have a couple more minutes. I might have to do a part 2 because I'm gonna have to. Some things have come up, and I'm gonna have to hop off here.
The obvious parallels drawn between chapter 7 and chapter 8 and 9. We cannot escape that.
No, what do you mean parallels between 7 and 8 to 9? Okay, the parallels, in part. Well, there's parallels. But the parallels in and of themselves do not mean that these parallels or the same language that is used in various verses connect the verses from different chapters. And so therefore it's referring to the same beast. Because that's what they're really getting at. Is that this is referring to the same beast, which is Rome. Rather, how you connect these verses is if Daniel 8 is referring to events that happened during the time of the goat, then you have to connect that. So during the time of the third beast, That's Greece. You have to connect that to the other chapters when they talk about the third beast. So if you connect it with chapter 7, you have to connect it with the leopard, not with the terrible beast. If you connect Daniel 8 with the terrible beast in chapter 7, you've already done eisegesis and not exegesis, because the activity of the little horn is during the time of the goat, the third beast. That's just plain. That's plain from the text. You don't need to be hopscotching around everywhere. You don't need to be doing all this in-depth interpretation, which you can. It won't change what I'm saying, I don't think, in my opinion. You'll still show that all this activity is happening from the little horn happens during the time of the third beast, which is Greece, which means it's during the time of the leopard of chapter 7, during the time of bronze. Is it bronze in chapter 2? And then in chapter 11 and 12, there's no beast that is mentioned, but it's during let's see, it's from verse like 3, this is my position, but verse 3 all the way to like verse 35 or something like that. So you have to connect them during the time that they're referencing.
And so
I can harmonize those for myself. It's not a problem. Let's just stick to the point, because I don't want to waste time, and I'm sure that you have other guests.
What I'm saying is, this is the point. If I'm going to read chapter 8 seriously, I have to have read chapter 2 seriously. I have to have read chapter 7 seriously. And here's something I want to bring to your attention. It's a very serious argument.
They do this a lot. They say, well, if you don't have like perfect understanding or really good understanding of these other chapters, you cannot understand Daniel 8. And that's not the case at all. I mean, yeah, it's good to understand those other ones. It's important. But you can actually get a grasp of Daniel 8 without having to go in depth with chapter 2 or 7 at all. They're just presupposing that their position is absolutely the absolute correct one. And it's the only way to interpret Daniel 8 or the book of Daniel properly and truthfully. So they say that kind of stuff, but that's not true. You can read Daniel 8 and you can see when the activity happens, during what time, and who defiles the sanctuary. You can see that from the text itself. And those two, if you answer those two questions from Daniel 8 alone, you'll see that it's not a heavenly sanctuary.
That I've never heard a satisfactory answer from a Protestant evangelical or an objector is in Daniel chapter 7 and Daniel chapter 8, you have very different visions, different animals, a different setting. You know, you have 4 predatory amalgamated animals in chapter 7. You have these sanctuary, clean animals in chapter 8. In chapter 7, you have this chaotic whirlwind on the sea. Chapter 7, you have these peaceful bodies of water. But there's one in all of those visions, there's one figure that remains the same. And that one figure that remains the same is the little horn. It's a very strong case that whoever the little horn is in chapter 7 is the same enemy of God and his people that's being spoken of in chapter 8. And so again,
it's not a strong case, but it's a case that one can make and people have. And I see why they do. But again, if you just understand that the little horn, you have to understand when the little horn, on what beast it arises on. Because little horns are never in and of themselves a new beast. And that's what the SDA system does. It says that the little horn is a new beast. That's not the case at all. That's bringing something into Daniel that Daniel does not present at all. Daniel never presents a little horn as a new beast. The little horn of chapter 7 is still the 4th beast. It's still Rome. In like manner, the little horn of Daniel 8 is still the goat, which is Greece. And that's the issue, one of the issues with the Adventist position. And that's a point that people who talk to Adventists need to hammer away at. And it's harder for a futurist who believes it's all future to do that. It's a lot harder. Somebody who holds to the Antiochus view, that's pretty simple. It's pretty easy. And they can't refute that.
What is it that's polluting the sanctuary? Our contention is it's the same little horn that thinks to change God's times and God's laws that is casting truth down to the ground. It's a work of spiritual deception of God's people, causing them to sin against God, thereby sending their sins to the sanctuary where they have to be cleansed and atoned for by the application of the blood of Christ, which was already completely and fully provided once for all by his sacrifice.
So much being assumed. So much being assumed there in what he's saying. So much. Because none of chapter 8 even hints at sins of God's people being stored in a heavenly sanctuary that defiles it and makes it unclean. None of it.
Sacrifice on the cross, but it has to be applied because God's people are being led to backslide, to apostatize because of deception. It's hard to escape.
Falling for deception or believing deception does not defile the heavenly sanctuary. That's a foreign concept to Scripture.
Right here in the text, that a part of the defilement of the little horn is the casting.
And it's hard to be in the next level's position because he just said so much. And if you address a lot of those things, you're going to sidetrack from the two main questions he originally brought up in a major way. You're going to get down all these rabbit holes because he just laid out like the sanctuary doctrine, type and antitype for Day of Atonement and all that kind of stuff. You can't really. That's crazy.
Down truth to the ground, and that is actually, as a matter of fact, notice this. It's transgression. That's the word.
None of this has proven it's a heavenly sanctuary. None of it has. Like, what has he actually said that proves it's a heavenly sanctuary? He's still assuming it. He just said Edwin made some good points, which to prove that it's a heavenly sanctuary, which he did not. In no way were those good points to prove that it is a heavenly sanctuary.
Used in the text is casting down truth to the ground. That's the last thing that's said before the question comes in: how long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice? And again, what's the specific contention or question? Transgression. The issue is sin. And yes,
I already said that, yeah. Sin of the little horn. We agree.
Right, exactly. But the sin of the little horn.
No, it's not exact. No, he may just be saying that, but because sometimes you just agree with what somebody says while you're talking because you want to make your point. But I don't think he actually agrees with that.
When you see how it's a persecuting power and you see how it's an influential world ruling power, naturally it's sin.
But here in 8, it's a power that's akin to Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar is called God's servant. That is dishing out God's indignation on the transgressors. So for you to then link that with like Revelation 12:17 and like the dragon persecuting the saints would be not the transgressors, they'd be the believers. It just doesn't connect together. But I'm going to have to, unfortunately, cut this early. I have some things that popped up and I'm already later than what I should be. So at 28 minutes, I'll start this next time. I have no clue when, but hopefully here soon. Hope you guys enjoyed and have a good rest of your day or night. Grace and peace, everybody. God bless.